Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Astro Gairu. I hope you're doing well today. I certainly am doing quite good myself. I'm actually doing this recording outside for a change, breaking the routine. But I just had to. Actually, didn't really plan. I just had my equipments with me, luckily, and I just came out to the park and kind of figured, I might as well, do some stuff, do some recording while I'm out here, enjoying the fantastic weather. Birds are singing, the sky is clear. Yeah, it's just beautiful. I'm really loving it. I apologize for the music in the background. I don't know if you guys hear it. There's a concert going on somewhere. I can't exactly see where it's going on, but it must be pretty close, obviously, because the sound is echoing here in the park. But it's summer, so there's like music festivals and concerts all over the place. So yeah, can't avoid those. Can't avoid those until winter gets back. So where of course then it's indoors, but and maybe not so many. But nonetheless, like I said, welcome to my channel. I'm going to be talking about the seventh house. This is part of a 12-part series where I talk about, houses in astrology, all the way from 1 to 12. I've already done recordings for the first, six houses, so definitely would recommend you to have a listen to those as they might help you get a better, or a more complete story because I also tend to give a lot of examples about how the different houses are connected and how they sort of like feed off of each other's energy or lack of energy, and how they sort of complement each other or oppose each other to sort of push the individual in a way that forces them to learn something maybe, or to just reap the benefits because they may have learned that lesson in a previous life. So so but nonetheless, it still helps, I think it still helps a lot to kind of go through all of them and see what resonates and see what makes sense. And yeah, before coming back to the seventh, um, I have other content as well that I've made and posted on the channel. I've talked about elemental influences, being an earth sign, being a water sign, an air sign, a fire sign, what that entails. I've talked about the qualities, in terms of cardinality, in terms of fixations and mutability. I've talked about deacons and, major aspects, in astrology, and also just the planets, a little bit of a breakdown about the planets, the types of energy that they sort of bring forth before they are forced, to embody a different type of energy in terms of the sign, and then also the house where that dynamic sort of plays out. And by that I mean that a certain planet acts as an actor, who comes in with their skills and their abilities, and then they have to embody a certain energy on a particular stage. So that energy might be the energy, of Pisces, or the energy of Leo, or the energy of Sagittarius, and the stage might be whatever house it finds, itself in. And of course, it tells quite a lot, how that particular aspect of your life will be, impacted, or influenced. And that is why I'm doing what I'm doing, to sort of give you the keys and to decode the meanings and the symbolism, the significance behind, the houses and all of the energy and the stuff that, goes in them. So, yeah, so I guess we're gonna dive right in. Did I say thank you? Did I thank you guys for liking, for sharing, for commenting, and for embarking on this journey with me? I'm really excited about this. It's something I'm super passionate about, and I'm so glad that I'm finally able to, talk about it and share it, and yeah, just sort of have the confidence to not maybe not be so afraid to talk about these things, even though it's not like hardcore science and it's not the traditional science that we add numbers and digits and formulas and so well, of course we do when we're calculating the birth chart, but of course traditionally astrology has always been seen as something that's maybe not to be taken so seriously. um, Actually, I shouldn't say traditionally, but maybe more in our in recent times, although that's changing now. I think more people are getting more and more into it. Um, but yeah, so thank you. Thank you, thank you. I tend to go off topic quite a lot, so I have to always remind myself to stay focused. So thank you so much for the support. And with that said, I think yeah, I think we're just gonna dive right into the seventh house. I am going to be giving you your keys to the seventh house. All right, so the seventh house. The seventh house is the first house of other people. The first six houses are considered personal houses. Um, those are also sort of like more. It makes sense because like when you think of the houses in terms of like life stages, it makes sense. Like you're kind of like you're born and you enter the world, into the house of Aries, and then you kind of go through the second house, where you learn or the values and beliefs and attitudes, gets instilled in us, when we're young, and we sort of, go through life with those values and those, beliefs and attitudes and so forth. And then we move into the third house of, communication and, elementary education that even, cements, those some of those attitudes and those beliefs that maybe some of them may not necessarily have been the best, but nonetheless, sometimes the elementary education does, cement those beliefs and those attitudes, that our parents teach us because they also got it from school and from their parents. And then we move into the fourth house, where the foundation starts to get laid, the notion of family, the notion of culture, of national pride, and um, yeah, that type of thing. And then we start to grow up and we want to move out of the family house and we want to rebel against our parents, and we go into the fifth house where we go a little bit crazy. We start dating, we start experimenting with our sexuality and sex and all of those things, so. And then once we even figure out what we want to do, like are we more artistic people, what types of hobbies we like, these are all like in the fifth house, right? And then we establish a routine, we establish a habit, we establish what we want to do, what our work will be, what our calling is going to be. And so that's our sixth house, right? Which I talked about in the last recording. And so as you can see why these are personal houses, because we're still going through our maturation, our growth, our sort of like our evolution from being born into young adulthood, And then once we're done with the work of the sixth house, well, we're never really quite done because, um, particular houses will still consistently, engage you or activate you. So you're never quite actually really, really done. With a particular house or with any of the houses, actually you still tend to draw influences even if you are 60 years old and you are in your 11th or your 12th house. In terms of astrology, you might still have things from your second house or your third house or your family house, which is the fourth house, that still maybe some traumatic experiences that still pulls you back to that fourth house, or somehow in terms of psychologically, that have you're kind of like fixated in that stage area, life stage. So you never really kind of get through these houses, it never just gets done and that's it, close the door and move on. Remnants of it still, kind of linger on indefinitely. um, but nonetheless, that's the sixth house, that we kind of go through those, and then we move into the seventh house, which is now the first house of other people. So these are the seventh all the way to the 12th house. These are considered the house of other people, and the house of external factors as well. And so the seventh house, because it's the first of other people, um, and it directly opposes the first, it's kind of seen as the descending house, because the first house is also seen as the rising house or the ascendant house. And so when you move into the seventh house, this is like the descendant. And I kind of see the seventh house as like, the mirror of yourself. This is where everything that you've learned, everything that you've done, like your attitudes that you've learned that were instilled in you consciously, unconsciously, your hobbies, your everything that you are basically comes to question or gets reinforced or gets confronted. If there were things that you were always in denial about yourself, or um, you then start meeting people in your seventh house that starts to mirror the things that you maybe don't want to admit about yourself. So it's I think like the seventh house is probably, when we say that the seventh house is one of the probably the most fun, the most positive, and most optimistic house, because we're kind of carefree, and I would say that the seventh house is probably the most painful. Personally, me, in my opinion, I don't know, because this is also like the house of heartbreak, and disappointments. Like I said, because now you're meeting people who are, you know, maybe you meet people who have had a different route to their seventh house, and then they see you and they see that you've had a different route to your seventh house, and they become jealous of you, and they sabotage you, or they try to destroy you, or crush your dreams, or crush your hopes, or crush your wishes. You know, these are like things that happen in the seventh house. Um, because your successful path to the seventh house might trigger someone else who did not have a very successful path to their seventh house. And so then there's the universe, or karma, or however you want to call it. This is the universe's first introduction to, okay, here are the life lessons to be learned. Um, you had a successful path that made you strong, that made you believe, in yourself. Um, and so you are going to encounter people who are going to crush that, you know? And the universe is like, are you going to withstand it? Everything that you've learned, your successful road all the way up to the seventh, your self belief, your self worth, your, work ethic, that you've kind of decided in your sixth house. Now the universe is like, when I throw obstacles, when I throw people who are of a low vibration towards you, are you able to withstand the barrage of all of that, and still come out victorious, and still progress to the eighth house, you know? And then it's also the opposite. It's the same applies for the other person who maybe did not have a very successful road. And of course, success and success is very relative and subjective. You can define it however you want to, or however it resonates to you. But let's say somebody did not have a good upbringing. They had troubles in their fourth house. Maybe they were unfairly treated during a casual date, you know, in their fifth house, or they had a mean boss, or like a mean colleague or something in their sixth house, who just crushed, their sense of, work ethic, or their sense of, whatever. And so they just had a path that was just not very pleasant. And so now they have this sort of like this low vibration, where they're just hating on other people who are doing well, because they just were not able to sort of like withstand their own challenges. And so now to them, the universe is saying, you know, it also challenges them, hopefully, to kind of see their own darkness and see their own pessimism, or pessimistic, viewpoints, or, behaviors. And to them, the universe is saying, can you become a better person? Or are you going to just continue crushing, the dreams and hopes of other people, because you have a low vibration, or because you have had so many, heartaches? So this is where we start to see these kinds of dynamics, in the seventh house. It's just the mirror, and it applies, across the board. It applies to love lives, where you tend to attract, for some people, you might have a tendency to attract, particular partners who just trigger something in you that just always rubs you the wrong way. You just don't understand why you're always attracting the same types of people, and then for someone else, it could apply to work, that you would want to go into a business venture, but you're always kind of meeting particular business people or business partners that kind of always, end up, like short-handing you or backstabbing you, and you just never always see it coming until it actually happens, and you're like, oh shit, why does this always happen to me? So these are the kinds of things that happen in the seventh house. um, Law, legal things. I mean, it's the house of Libra, it's the house of justice. So that doesn't mean that things are always going to be that life is always going to be serving you a plate of all things good and fairness and justice. Sometimes it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be the opposite effect, because the Libra is the scales. So either things are tipped are tipped on the one side, or they're tipped on the other side, but it's never it's hard to sort of find that balance, that equilibrium. So um so that's the thing, that's the challenge with the seventh house. And I just see it as the most, probably the most painful of all the houses. And like, once you emerge from your seventh house, successful, you become so strong. You become so strong. And again, it depends on the planets you have there. It depends on the aspects you have there. Some people just get lucky. Maybe you have planets that just make you more likable to other people, and you just kind of somehow that energy just allows you to just, like, slide under the radar, go unnoticed, just do your business. You're lucky if you have Jupiter there. I think you might probably be like pretty lucky, because I think Jupiter brings some of its charm, some of its lightheartedness, and its luck, to seventh house, dealings. And so you might, especially in love, you might just be, attracting partners who, might well, they might want to destroy that because they see how lucky you are. But you might also, if it's well aspected, you might attract people who, you know you might, yeah, just fly under the radar, and maybe not be seen like as a threat so much, because this happy-go-lucky, almost like a joker or fool type of people. You always just look at them and think, he's just a happy, always happy guy. He's not a threat. Like, you just leave let him be, or let her be, or whatever. But all the meantime, this person is doing their thing. Doing their thing, and before you know it, bam, eighth house, ninth house, 10th house, and they've lived out their life purpose, and it's done. Um, but then other people might have planets that just are so dominating and so strong, and they just trigger people, or they just rub people the wrong way. Maybe you have Aries, there, or you have Mars influence there, and Mars is like this confident sign, and it wants to dominate. It wants to, So in business dealings, you might always come with this energy where you want to dominate. You just want your voice or your ideas, to be heard, and nobody else's. And so what that translates is, like, it might also translate in resistance a lot of times, because people will think, oh, who do you think you are? You think other people's ideas don't matter, or so again, it depends, what's going on in the seventh house. Yeah, so that's the seventh house. What else is there for the seventh house? Let me see what I have here. um, yeah, so yeah, definitely people that you are attracted to in intimate ways. So, and this is also the house of marriage. So, remember, like, from the fifth house, you're kind of like dating, you know, like casually dating, and just having fun, figuring things out, figuring your sexuality, maybe even, you know, and then the sixth house, you know, you start spending nights, at each other's house, on Tuesdays, my place, Fridays, your place, Tuesdays, my place, Fridays, your place, trying it out, trying to set a routine, trying to set like some sort of you know, a pattern there, and then seeing that it works, there's good chemistry, there's good organization, you guys blend well, and then seventh house, bam, married. Move in together indefinitely, hopefully, if there is no divorce down the line. so so that's how the seventh house is like the house of marriage. So now you've agreed to get into a love partnership or love union with this person. You've studied them, it works for you, and so then it proceeds. So that's why it's referred to as the house of marriage. I've talked about open enemies. Here it's like your enemies are just like, it's like you just have open enemies where Um, Enemies might not always, well, sometimes they'll just, be very upfront in your face. Um, Not even secretly hiding it. Usually, like, the 12th house is also the house of enemies, but usually those are like secret enemies. So those are enemies that you are not so always exposed to, because remember, everything in the 12th house is like a mist. It's the house of Neptune, so it's like blurry. So you never really see the activities of the 12th house. It takes a lot of work to be able to. But in the 7th house, your enemies are so open. Like, you might have friends who jokingly would, say that they hate you, or jokingly would always be making jokes that, imply a certain envy, or just imply, you just get vibes that, like, why does this person always make jokes that are not uplifting, or are not, um, supportive, or, encouraging? And then they do stuff that you later hear from somebody else, or find them in the act that, they were your friend, but they were backstabbing you, your friend in your face, but then the moment you walk away, they're pointing a finger and gossiping about you. These types of people are also seventh house vibrations and seventh house energies. If it's heavily loaded and poorly aspected, these are themes that will be consistently be playing out, like, in your life, as you progress through it. um yeah, I already talked about the feelings and the thoughts, always being reflected back to us. Like, as I was saying, the things that we may not always want to admit, about ourselves, we'll always find that, people in the seventh house will always be reminding us of those things. So, like I was saying, if it's envy, or like a certain attitude, like, aggression or kindness or whatever it might be, you'll always find yourself having those things, being reflected back to you. But I mentioned that already. Um, what else is there? Yeah, also your doctors, I hear, your dentists, your lawyers, your clients, your patients, pretty much anyone you have an association with. I mean, this is like the first house of other people. So this is where you really get introduced to other people. This is your professor, this is your coach, this is your fitness instructor, this is, your pilot, your air hostess, and all of the people that you sort of come into contact with in some sort of faded way, some sort of, how you always meet people and you always feel like it feels faded. Like, sometimes it's even in their energy way. It feels like, why do I feel like I know this person from somewhere? Or even though you're in the conscious mind, you're very much aware that you've never seen this person anywhere before. But just in their energy, there's something that feels comfortably familiar or uncomfortably familiar. And sometimes you can't, most of the time you cannot put your finger on it, what that thing is. But it could be that actually you guys had a very, very powerful relation or powerful connection in a previous lifetime. Um, this is also the house of deja vu. So this is where, like, you have these are like basically these are like deja vus, pretty much, where you meet somebody and um, and you just go into this trance where you're like, I feel like I know this person. Like, why does this person feel so familiar? Like, what is it? And sometimes it's a really good familiarity, it's a weirdly good feeling of, like, where do I know this person from? Could be that this was your partner. Could be this person was your ex-wife, your ex, husband, or was your brother, was your father, or your mother. And if you really stay within that energy and meditate over it, and pray over it, it might be revealed to you that this person was your brother or your sister, or was a lover of yours. Um, and and then like I said, also the opposite is true, that it might be uncomfortably familiar in a way that's like really frightening, and it almost like um, you might even feel it in your body, like a cold, sensation. and like a cold tingling sensation, like a electrical shock, or like, that just runs through your body like an electrical current. And then you get overcome by a sudden fear out of nowhere, just by seeing this person. And it could be like, again, if you do the same thing, and I mean, if you're seeing this person over and over, for some reason, maybe you move to a new neighborhood and you're seeing this person all the time, and they just give you this awkward feeling. If you like start meditating over it, it might be revealed to you that maybe this person killed you, in a previous lifetime. Like they were the reason to your demise. Or they conspired against you in some way or another. And so you meet them again in this lifetime, and maybe there's a lesson to be learned there, or there's just a warning to stay away from that person, do not trust that person. So these are all kinds of activities that are, that are present, that take place. These are activities of the seventh house, usually. So that's why I call it the painful house. Like, I don't like the seventh house. Yeah. But some people, again, might have an empty seventh house. Um, and of course, I mean, it's connected to your first house. Because it's a cardinal house, so it's connected to the house of Aries, it's connected to the house of Cancer, the fourth house, and it's also connected to the house of Capricorn, the 10th house, the career, future. And then, of course, the fourth house, family, and the first house, yourself, your entry into the world and so forth. So, again, like I was making examples with other houses, like if it's empty, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doomed or anything like that, but you might just, you might just be pulling from the other houses. You might maybe draw more strengths from your first house or your fourth house or even your 10th house to compensate for an empty seventh house, But usually an empty house might probably indicate an individual who might have difficulties maybe finding really, like having really good bonds, like having best friends might be a bit of a challenge. There's just something about your energy that just does not vibrate. Because again, like as I was saying, it's empty, so there's no energy. So there's nothing that pulls people in towards you, towards your seventh house, because there's nothing happening there. And so um, you might still have contact, with people, but they will probably feel more. They'll probably feel more like associates as opposed to very intimate or very close. Let's say, for example, if your first house is very loaded, that's the house of Aries, the house of self, the I am house, So if you have a very loaded, first house, your sense of self, your self-confidence, your self-esteem might be, very well developed, So, sorry, might be very well developed. So that could make you, for example, like a very good, speaker, somebody who speaks about empowerment, somebody who speaks about, building confidence and, and we see these types of people who are like, who are, what are they called? Motivational speakers, a motivational speaker could be someone who has a combination of a really good third house, communication skills, but also importantly, someone who has a very well aspected first house, the house of, of self, because usually people who are motivational speakers get to a point where they have, been challenged through life to really activate, themes of their first house, and they get to a point where they evolve maybe a little bit more quicker, than other people. And so then it becomes easier for them to become motivational speakers because they've sort of gone through the process of getting to know, themselves, and so it becomes easier for them to do these kinds of work, these kind of jobs. And so in this way, it could compensate for their seventh house. So in them traveling around and giving speeches, and motivating people and, things of that nature, might still expose them to people, large groups of people where they do this work. And people might feel a very strong bond and a very strong connection to them because obviously they're empowering the community, the society. So of course, people in the society will feel a sense of closeness and a bond towards this person, but this person is still at a distance in a way. It's almost like looking at a celebrity. Like we admire them, we adore them, we revere them, and we almost feel as if we know them, and we feel a sense of entitlement to their life and what they're going through. That's why we always buy the tabloids, and we want to see what cars they're driving, what dramatic things are going on in their personal lives, because we feel so invested. But at the same time, they're not like seventh house friends or seventh house partners because they're not actively activating our seventh house. They are not really there. It's just somebody who feels so close and personal, but they're actually not personal. They don't even know who you are, these celebrities and so forth. So it's kind of the same effect. So if somebody who has a seventh house might not have a lot of close friends, or like, very powerful intimate connections, but they will still be able to connect to people through their first house activities or even through their 10th house, activities. So it's never really totally like a doom. Um, and and also an empty seventh house also might in some cases make them, seeing that the seventh house is a very brutal, like a brutal house. I feel like, in my opinion, also the seventh house might make them sometimes maybe a little bit more susceptible or victims to fraud, or to, because there's no protection there. Like for example, if they have the sun maybe in the seventh house, because the sun brings light wherever the sun, in whichever the house the sun finds, in whichever house the sun finds itself in, it always illuminates the activities of that. It brings light to that house. So if this native or this individual had the sun in their seventh house, they might um, um, be able to see their enemies quite easily, because the sun will show them somehow through their energy, through their vibration. They'll just know not to trust certain people, or enemies will just be revealed to them either through dreams, through impressions, through clairvoyance, or just something of that nature will happen, if they have, for example, the sun there, to protect them. And so if somebody wants to cheat them out of their money, if it's like a business dealing or something, they will be able to pick that up somehow. um, but if it's negatively aspected, they will miss those details, you know. And if it's empty, they will be totally blind because it's like there's nothing going on in the seventh house, so it's easy for other people to take from it. Well, obviously there's nothing to take from it if it's empty, but if somebody wants to go into a partnership with you, you're always going to approach seventh house things with a bit of naivety, because you don't have the seventh house activated, so you don't have that experience, like, so to speak. So it becomes a challenge. But then again, like I was saying, because it's connected to your 10th house, the house of, Capricorn, the disciplinarian, the wise old, father figure. If your 10th house is activated and positively aspected, you might still be able to benefit from that house's activities to protect you and shield you a little bit from, people wanting to take advantage of you in your seventh house. Because, what's the 10th house? Like I said, it's discipline, it's old wise wisdom, So if it's active and somebody comes to you and tries to smooth talk you, you can still draw onto that Capricornian energy of like, I see what you're doing, I see where you're going, I've been here, I've done that, I know what this smooth talk is all about. You can't fool me, Capricorn. I'm a wise old soul. so, so it's kind of like that, with an empty seventh house. So what's the case with you guys? Do you have an empty seventh house? Do you have any planets there? What's the situation? I should actually check what mine looks like. I don't know. And then yeah, I think I've pretty much um, said everything that I had here. Um, and also, In terms of how this translates to the psychology of the individual, it shows an individual who seek themselves through others. But I talked about this already, like the mirroring effect, where we kind of try to find ourselves, whether unconsciously or, subconsciously through other people. So so again, it sort of speaks to that. Yeah. So yeah, it speaks to that, and they also can be people who have really strong personalities. Like if the seventh house is very loaded, especially if there's Mars energy here or Aries energy here, they can be very strong-willed, good negotiators, uh, good business people, just very hard-headed, strong-willed people with that Martian energy there. Um, and they might also seek partners who are kind of like that. And um, if people are not as strong as they are, or strong-willed as they are, it usually turns them off. I think because they like a challenge, if it's like a loaded seventh house, like they like a challenge. Um, and there's quite a bit of a power dynamic thing here again with like Libra, the balancing of scales. And if you have like Martian energy there, it especially makes it like a power dynamic type of thing also, where either to partners they might be very intimidating to others, and so people might not easily want to approach them or date them, and they themselves would be seeking out partners who are not threatened by their sort of like powerful aura. And so they tend to attract partners then who are also just as strong-willed, and that can lead to lots of fights and power fights. Again, going back to that example of like depending how the other person got to their seventh house and how you got to your seventh house, and so there's a lot of stuff to be ironed out, So, but they live for that, the power dynamic. Um, yeah, I think that's it. It rules the body parts that are ruled by the seventh house is the kidneys, the bladder, and the lower back. So like the lower back may also be like a source of pleasure for these people, like massaging the lower back, rubbing the lower back, could be like pleasurable for them. In cases where it's poorly aspected, they might have back problems, especially lower back problems, or even kidney problems or bladder related problems, if it's poorly aspected. So, yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. Just to sum it up, it's the house of Jesus. Like I'm seriously, like I'm trying to dodge mosquitoes here. Like I'm just like I can't even stand still. They're coming after me. Something about my blood must be tasty to them. But yeah, anyway, so just to sum it up, it's the house of lovers, it's the house of close friends, it's also the house of enemies, it's the house of partnerships, and these partnerships can be either your doctor, your fitness instructor, your dentist, whatever. It's the house of marriage. It's the house of more serious kind of romance. Once you've done all the fifth house kind of fooling around. um, yeah, it's also the projections of our shadow sides, and yeah, and also customers. But I guess that would go into also partnerships because it's a trade. It's still an exchange. So yeah, that's the seventh house in a nutshell. Yeah, I think that's all I had for the seventh house. And I think I'll leave it here. Yeah, I think I'll leave it here for the seventh house. If you guys liked this, please do, hit the like button. You're welcome to, also leave a comment, or whatever you found interesting. Let me know what you found interesting, actually. Did you learn something different? Was there a new perspective that you got from here? What's your seventh house experience? Do you have any planets there? Um, yeah, let me know. Let me know. So yeah, let's wrap this one and move on to the next one. which is the eighth house. Now that I've, successfully given you the keys to your seventh house. So, yeah. So we're gonna wrap it up, and thank you once again. And I will see you or hear from you in the next one. So, ciao.